Good morning and welcome everyone. Welcome to the G Lodge. We sit on the land of the Onondaga peoples. So we're going to have a welcoming address from Mr. Loran Thompson. He's our VIP guest from the Mohawk Nation up in Akwesasne. And he is Wolf Clan. And he's going to give us a welcoming. So thank you, Loran.
This wahton di asquaquata hasa umoni when this rada yung wesa di agwego scono the one utonio dano yung wata garita. Nana kan wala dosa and the what's go sawi. Okay, I just gave a Thanksgiving, okay, for all of us here that have come forward, put all of our work and responsibilities aside to come to listen, okay.
And we're proud to welcome Christina culley from Virginia. And she has a message about her journey of seeking the truth relentlessly.
This is the first time I've ever presented my research or my story. I'm hopeful that it goes as smooth as it should. A friend of mine she helped create the PowerPoint presentation and make sure that I stay on the topic of our discussion today. So the name of my presentation is Roots of a Nation, How I Became an Accidental Revolutionary. It's a peaceful revolution that I'm standing in, but I am currently standing in a revolutionary stance due to my research, which never intended to be that way. So I'm in a weird place politically because I'm not really sure where to go from this place. Well, actually, I think I have an idea, but that'll be another talk later. My name is Christina. I have been studying seeking truth for a really long time. I've studied lots of different religions, lots of different holy books, from the Bible to the Bhagavad Gita, just, kind of taking it all in. I've spent time with Buddhist monks, spent a long time meditating with them, and one of the things that we prayed together and during this chanting was Sabe Sata, which means may all beings be happy and may all beings be free from stress and pain. And so when you chant that twice a day for a year, it really plants seeds in the heart that this is a consideration to consider, may all beings in all of the universe be happy. I'm a mom. I have 3 kids. I have a 24-year-old, an 11-year-old, and a 12-year-old. It says I'm an intellectual explorer, but prior to going to massage school, I did not graduate from high school. I dropped out in the 10th grade. I thought I was retarded, and so I'll get into what happened when I went into massage school, but I got my GED when I was 17. I've been a massage therapist for 22 years, which is a long time. I also like to take pictures. So that'll be the next one. Okay, and so my purpose in sharing this information is I have poured many hours into this research. There was no, it wasn't for school. And it wasn't for a job. It was because I was curious. And so it's important to me that this information is not monetized in a way to make dollars, because it was my blood that went into it. Not just my blood, but it's I poured this into it because the only way that we can right the wrongs of the past is in the present. This is my belief anyway. I can't do anything about things that have happened historically, but I can do something about my present to acknowledge the roots of our nation, which I didn't know, so we're going to get into all of that, and to honor this agreement that we made as a United States to the Iroquois Confederacy, to share what I have learned over the last 7 to 20, 40 years, depending on how you look at it, to encourage the consideration of peace as a revolutionary stance rather than some sort of violent one. I was an at-risk youth. I had a troubled childhood. I'm not going to go into any of the details, but I dropped out of school in the 10th grade. I homeschooled myself for about a year. I got pregnant and I got my GED. Then I went to massage school. One of the things that I learned when I was in massage school, one of the first things I learned was that there was a divine spark in every cell. There was a little sun in every cell, in everything living. And it changed my worldview, because I had been, I had gone through the system, and I was taught a fragmented reality, except I didn't know that there was a holistic truth. And so when I went to massage school and I started learning, after thinking that I was stupid, and I started learning this holistic vision, I started studying neuroscience for fun. And so it really changed the way that I perceived learning. It changed the way that I just perceived everything, actually. It changed me in a lot of ways. I learned about the nervous system. I learned about the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system, the stressful nervous system and a peaceful nervous system. This all is going to tie into this treaty, but it's just going to take me a little while to get there. I learned about the fascial system, and I also learned that when I put my hands on another human being, that I'm on holy ground, I'm on sacred ground. And so the way that I was trained was to empty myself and to hold like a resonance of peace for my client so that their nervous system and my nervous system could be, peaceful together. And I figure at this point I've probably worked on between 20 and 30,000 human beings, so I've been doing this a long time. Okay, and so with my training, I was trained blindfolded and barefoot. So I was taught how to see with my eyes closed so that I could tune into this connective tissue, which we'll get into in the next slide. It's a living organism inside. Okay, so we have our nervous system. Is everyone familiar with the nervous system? How it works?
Look, I've got
Yeah? Oh, you have a nervous It's interesting to think about the nervous system on an individual basis, and also how as a collective, as a people, right? So we have the individual, but then as the individual, we create the collective. We have the sympathetic nervous system, which is it's fight, flight, freeze, and fawning. We don't talk about the freeze and the fawning as much, but the way that works is that if somebody were to come in here right now aggressively, we would, one, see if we could take them, right? Or first we'd see, we'd one or the other. We'd either try to fight them, or if we didn't think that we could fight them, we would try to run away from them for safety. If they locked the door and there was no way for us to escape, then it would turn on another part of our nervous system where we have to survive, right? So we can't fight you, and we can't run away from you, and so now we're going to try to make you happy. We're going to try to appease you. What happens is we go to fight, flight, freeze. After freeze is death. So I don't know if you've ever seen a possum get spooked. They actually go into the freeze state. It's a protective mechanism. So they fake their death, because then, the animal walks away thinking that they're dead or whatever. And so that's kind of cool that we do that individually. But then when I look at that as a collective society, a lot of the things that Sunny was talking about, think about this consideration of some sort of hierarchical power structure, right? And so I feel like we as a collective appear to be apathetic to the current state of our situation, and we're not really sure what to do. But I believe that we're stuck in a collective freeze state. And so there is a way to come out of this freeze state and go into a peaceful state of being. Let's see. So sympathetic nervous system. So that's all very, I love the nervous system. I think it's fascinating just the way that we're kind of this mechanism, and it's our electrical system for our body. And so then we have the parasympathetic nervous system. When we're in the sympathetic nervous system, all of our blood, all of our tissues, all of the attention, it goes outwards. So our respiration is decreased, our digestion is decreased. All of those things are outside to protect us from an external threat. And what's interesting about the mind is that the mind doesn't differentiate between a true threat and a mental thought that's a threat. So it reacts the same way, which I find really interesting. So when we go into a parasympathetic state, all of our fluids come back in, our respiration, our heart rate, our digestive system, all of our organs start to function. It's a healing state of being. I think that's, now this increases sexual arousal, but I learned in massage school that the only time, so you're in one or the other all the time. And the only time that those two nervous systems work as one is when you're making love. So since it's on there, I just throw that out there. Because I think that's cool that they actually do work together at some point in time. This is our connective tissue. My teacher says that it is the container of consciousness. It is this fibrous-like structure. And what's really interesting about connective tissue is when it's cold, it feels like putty. It's a little hard, like a cold putty. But then there's this piezoelectric thing that happens when you sustain pressure for a period of time, and it actually liquefies and it becomes this gelatinous structure, and it's the fluid body. One of the things that I've learned through this work is we hold traumas in our hippocampus and our amygdala in the brain, and we also hold it in every cell of our body, which is kind of interesting. So moving through like a post-traumatic stress sort of thing, one of the things that I learned through neuroscience is that when you have a traumatic event and you have you've had this traumatic event and you go to sleep is when this memory crystallizes in your brain. And when you're in the middle of a flashback, which could be a smell could trigger it, there could be all kinds of different things that would trigger this, that memory actually becomes liquefied again in that emotional center of the brain, and the brain recreates every chemical that was present at the time that the trauma occurred. And so one of the things that I've seen with this body work, they do something called unwinding, where the body will actually guide the practitioner into the spatial relationship that the trauma occurred, and to be in a safe place where this traumatic memory is reactivated. It can change the emotional charge that is stuck in the brain. So you're basically reliving this traumatic event, but you're doing it in a container of safety, and that changes the way that it's processed. Yeah, this is quantum intelligence connected to all living things in the universe. And so, like I said before, I was trained blindfolded, and so I was trained I sense, I feel a lot through my work. And I can feel a lot just from the feet all the way up through the body, and I've been doing this a long time, and there's a reason why this is connected to this treaty that we're going to talk about in a little bit. Just showing the interconnectedness of our inner self, and this is my training. This has been my training for a long time. And we're just going to jump right into why I'm here. Does anyone know what the first sentence of the Declaration of Independence is? Yes.
We the people.
No. Does anyone else know the first sentence of the Declaration of Independence? No, don't feel bad. Nobody knows it.
That's the whole point of it.
Yeah, that's the whole point of my talk.
I had to start on the story.
I'm sorry. Maybe I should try to because I don't want you to feel funny about it.
No.
That's the Constitution anyway.
Do a multiple choice next time.
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
That's a
He
really
was
good.
sacrificing.
I was sacrificing myself.
Thank you, thank you for taking one for the team.
Give us the first word and then we'll see.
When?
When in the course of human events.
When?
Go ahead.
I don't remember anything after that. When in the course of human events.
Yep.
It becomes necessary.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll just go to the next slide.
Yeah.
When in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate yet equal station to which the laws of nature and nature's God entitle them. A decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to separation. Has anyone not heard that first sentence
I
before?
have never heard that.
So it's a long story how I ended up going back to the first sentence of the Declaration of Independence, and I'll probably just leave that for another story time. But there were some things that were happening. Oh, just one thing before I keep going. Do you see these little QR codes in the corner? The lady that created this PowerPoint, she made it to where all of the documents that I'm going to be sharing with you are QR codable. So if you would like to access my research, it is all public information for the most part. Anyway, so I read this sentence and I had never read it before. I got to the laws of nature and I started thinking about my work, because there's a lot that goes into my work. I started thinking about, for a long time, you work with people. People are in pain. Why are they in pain? Well, what are we disconnected from? We're disconnected from nature as a people in general. We're very intellectual. We're not necessarily like connected with all that is, like as a culture. And I just know that from going through public school and all that kind of thing. So to me, one of the things that I thought about with this first sentence was I learned in public school that the first sentence of any speech or document is your hook line. It's your most important line. I just thought it was interesting that I went through, 10 years of public school and I never learned this first sentence ever. And it seemed to be really profound. And so I got to the laws of nature and I thought, well, if there's laws of nature, there's lawyers of nature. Who would the lawyers of nature be? And I've taken a few classes of herbalism. I've been doing body work and I've studied yoga and I've studied all these things, and my family's from England. And I grew up, my grandmother would talk about things like ley lines and people not having a heart if they dug up plants without, and put concrete down. So I thought I'm like, well, if there's laws of nature, then there's lawyers of nature, and who would the lawyers of nature be? And I thought about indigenous people. I thought about herbalists, midwives. I thought about, we're going to get into where I live. I thought about the mountain people because they live by the almanac. And then I was like, wait a second, this is the first sentence. What has happened to the people that live in harmony with the land? So another thing that I thought about was, with laws of nature, when I was studying herbalism, one of the things that I learned is that the medicines that we need show up in our backyard. And so I thought that was really cool, that just like by living and breathing in an environment, that we're so loved by creation that the medicines that we need come to us. I thought that was really cool, and I thought about the mycelial network. And so you can play that little video in case you're not familiar with it. The interesting thing about mycelium is that it's also very similar to connective tissue, which I thought was also, so there's I have this internal knowledge of the way that the body works, and then thinking about these external things. This is Dr. Emoto's work. Have any of you heard of Dr. Emoto's work? So he's a Japanese scientist, and he took this water, it was tap water. He did a bunch of different experiments, had these water droplets, and he played music to some, he wrote kind, loving words on some, he spoke to some, there was a lot. There was, I think it was the water in Tokyo was dead, and so they would do these experiments with the children where the children spoke life into the water and then they tested it again. And so these are just a couple things that the crystals, it was the same water, and just the way that it changed the cellular structure of the water. Compassion versus I will kill you. And remember, the way the brain works is it doesn't differentiate, but everything is an I to the mind. And so when we're looking outside and we hate you, it's actually telling the mind that we hate ourselves. So it doesn't differentiate between outside and inside because we're all connected to all the things. And so I thought about this. Okay, so in the meantime, I thought, well, I'm going to call the Supreme Court to ask them what the laws of nature are, since they hold our nation's laws. This is kind of what started, and I'm not sure. Right now I'm a little nervous because I'm doing this talk, but I'm like, which one happened first? But I've actually called the Supreme Court many times. I'm probably on 25 watch lists at this point, but that's fine. My intentions are good. And so I called the Office of Public Information at the Supreme Court, and I let them know that I read the first sentence of the Declaration of Independence that I had never read before, and it talked about the laws of nature, and I was wondering if you could tell me what they are since you hold our nation's laws. And she was like, I'm sorry, I can't help you with this. Click. And I was like, okay. And so the next place I called was the White House. And she was like, I don't know, baby, Google it, And so that's kind of how this started. And so I went through, let's see, okay, so where I live is Shenandoah National. I live in the Shenandoah Valley, I actually took that picture. I think it's a very beautiful place. And one of the things about the history of where I live is in the 1930s, there was a eugenics program that happened in the Shenandoah National Park where the state decided that they wanted to make a national park. And they decided that the mountain people were hillbillies and we needed to get them out of there and preserve the nature. And so they started with offering them $1 an acre, and they moved them to these homes down in the city, which isn't really a city, but it might as well have been a city. And so my practice is located in the middle of nowhere. So my clients are descendants from a lot of these families. And so I'm talking to them. They don't trust the government because they have their own experience with the government. I'm working on one of my clients, and I'm sure that this is the most peaceful conversation you can have while you're receiving a massage. And I'm talking to them about how I read the first sentence and he'd never heard it before and I'm telling him that, laws of nature, and they lived by the almanac. This is something that I know about them as a people, that they used to live by the almanac. And what happened was they came in and they burned their houses down. So if you ever go through the Shenandoah National Park, you'll just see these like standing chimneys because they burned their homes down. It's an old hat that our government's been doing to a lot of people throughout pretty much for a long time. So anyway, so my office is located there. And so I'm talking to my clients about that. You could play that if you want to, but we'll just turn it down. It's got oh, and that's a QR code. This is somebody that the person that created this is a scholar in my community. He's done 800 family trees for families that were removed just in my county, and there's 9 surrounding counties. So he's got that. So I'm talking to my client and about all of this stuff, and he's like, you need to go talk to the indigenous elders. Go find them and go talk to them and see if they can, tell them what's going on. So that's what I did. I called the Cherokee because I didn't know anything about anything. So I called the Cherokee, and I talked to North Carolina, I've called Oklahoma, I've talked to Lakota, I've talked to Lummi Nation, I've talked to all the 6 nations at this point. I talked to the Center for Truth and Reconciliation up in Winnipeg. I've called a lot of people, hundreds and hundreds of phone calls. And so these are some of the families. One of the interesting things that I have found as I've gotten deeper into this research is a lot of the mountain people actually had an indigenous grandparent. And so this is not, I feel like there's similarities that I've been finding for all people that have lived in harmony with the land, and this actually goes internationally as well. As I got to digging deeper into this, anyone who lives in harmony with the land has had some form of oppressive force that tried to kill the fire inside of the people of some kind or another. But fortunately, the heart and love is stronger than any darkness. I believe. So I learned about the Two-Row Wampum Treaty. Does anybody know about the Two-Row Wampum Treaty? No. I learned about we're actually going to get into more of this in the beginning from when we actually started. And if I am wrong to either of the wisdom keepers in the room, please shut me down and correct me. Anyway, so when I called around to these indigenous, the difference between our government and the indigenous communities that I called, because I called the indigenous government offices, which that's a whole nother story. But our government continued to hang up on me. I've talked to the DOD, I've talked to the DOJ, I've called the Supreme Court, I've called legislative, I've called state, I've local emails, letters, I've done all the things, and I have not gotten any response. When I was calling around to the indigenous communities, it was like laws of nature. Can you tell me what the laws of, I was curious because I wanted to apply it to my own life. What does that mean exactly? It's foundational to our nation, and what have we created that's in harmony with nature was the next question that came to my mind. And so I promised, she's now an assistant chief of one of the nations in my local community, that I would write a letter to our government. And I also promised the lady that answered the phone at the Lakota Nation that I would write a letter. They have been so encouraging, keep going, keep going. Whereas our government's like, they don't want to talk to me. And I don't know, I have a power and control wheel somewhere up here, and so, but it's not here. So this is my letter that I wrote to our government, and then I recorded it and put it on a TikTok.
Okay, so I have written a letter to our elected officials based on a lot of research that I've done, and I'm pretty excited about it, so I wanted to share it. Here's what it says. I read the first sentence of the Declaration of Independence, and so many questions came to mind. The first one being, why didn't I learn this in the 12 years that I attended public school? I contacted the Supreme Court to ask what the laws of nature are, but they disconnected the call on multiple occasions. Maybe I reached out to the wrong office? The first sentence states, when in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal stations to which the laws of nature and nature's God entitle them. A decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare their causes which impel them to separation. Then we go into, we hold these truths to be self-evident. What are the laws of nature? Who is nature's God? Who are the lawyers of nature? What has happened to the people that live in harmony with nature? What have we as a nation created that's in harmony with nature? Why do we have people fighting so that we can have clean air, food, water, and medicines in a country whose primary responsibility is to protect our right to life? If we're not in harmony with nature / creation, how can we protect any living thing's right to life? Do we as a nation acknowledge a creator? Do we acknowledge that there are certain natural laws we cannot break or all of humanity suffers? The authors of the Declaration of Independence were clear that we have one creator that created nature, encompassing all religions, gods, that we may meet on common soil in harmony with nature / creation as children of that creator. It seems like this concept was so paramount to the formation of our democracy and the republic to which we stand that they made it the very first sentence. Where did it go? Thank you for your time, and I look forward to hearing from you. Sincerely yours, a concerned citizen.
The first thing that I was curious about was, what are the laws of nature? The second thing I was curious about was domestic violence natural in indigenous communities? What does it mean to be woman? What does it mean to be safe as a woman? And so there's a lot of different parts to this, and I may have been walking 3 or 4 paths at one time, sorting things out inside of me, and then also seeing it externalized in other things. And so one of the things I learned about was Buffalo Calf Woman. Have you all heard of Buffalo Calf Woman? So I have a little video that we can play about, and it doesn't really get into what I like about Buffalo Calf Woman, where she's a very powerful woman, but we'll just play that. And
During a time of great hardship, 2 men went out to hunt. Along the way, they met a beautiful woman dressed in buckskin who floated as she walked. One man had lustful desires for the woman and was consumed by a cloud and turned into a pile of bones. The woman spoke to the second man and said, "Return to your people and tell them to prepare, for I am coming in 4 days." This holy woman brought a bundle to the people. Inside was the Wakan Chinupa, the sacred pipe. With this holy pipe, you will walk like a living prayer. The pipe's bowl is made from red stone. It is the blood of your ancestors and represents the female. The stem of the pipe is made from the tree of life and represents the male. When you put them both together, you connect the world above and the world below. You pray for and with everything. She told them to honor the ceremonies and sacred sites. Each sacred site is an altar to the Great Spirit, she taught. Before she left, she said that her spirit would return to help us in a time of great hardship, and that we would recognize her. As she left the people, she rolled over and became a black buffalo, then a red, yellow, and finally a white buffalo. This is where she received her name, White Buffalo Calf Woman.
So I love this story about Buffalo Calf Woman. I actually learned about another woman called Deer Woman, which I also really appreciate because it's not from my culture, you know, the one that I grew up in. I didn't know that there are two types of ways of being perceived as a woman. Buffalo Calf Woman was recognized as powerful and spiritual, which is not really part of our culture, that as a woman. And so what I thought was really cute, not cute, but I like this about her, is that the man that looked at her in a lustful way, I've heard this story that she's like, come, like this is what you want, come get it. And so this cloud of dust circles around them, and all that's left of him is bones. And so I don't know why, but I just think that it tickles my little heart, because it's sort of like she's not a victim. She's the one in charge, and she's like, oh, this is what you want, come get it. And there's nothing left of him. He killed himself by not seeing what she actually is. And then the one that was spiritual and saw her clearly, she helped him save their people. And so I just think that like, for me, it was very empowering to learn this story about Buffalo Calf Woman. And so, at the time, I had been going to domestic violence support groups. And so I was learning a lot about domestic violence. I was unpacking a lot of my own history, my own generational history. I was learning a lot about a lot of different things. And so I learned about this power and control wheel, which I'm not sure if anybody is familiar with the power and control wheel. Some of the ways which an abuser abuses a victim of domestic violence is using intimidation, using emotional abuse, isolation, minimizing their experience, denying it, blaming them for what happened, using children, threatening to take the children away, saying that, you know, you're not good enough to be able to keep your children, calling Child Protective Services for the children. There's a connection here. I'm going to get into it. Using male privilege, which is the opposite of someone like Buffalo Calf Woman, is saying, like, I'm the man and you're to submit to me because I'm the powerful one, versus there being a balance of all of that. Withholding money is another thing. Forcing people into poverty is also part of that. And then also, you know, manipulating people and threatening them. And so one of the things that hit me was that every single thing on this power and control wheel, so the center and foundation of indigenous wisdom is there's Mother Earth. And so these are feminine principles, truth, humility, love, compassion. These are all like central to indigenous teachings from what I've been able to gather. There's a lot of differences, but then there's also what I found is like a common theme. And so in my mind, I put these together. And what I realized is that our government, our United States government, if you were to put the power and control wheel and, you know, that's an abuser, and then you have the indigenous way as a feminine, you know, like as a nation, we've actually done all of these things, not just to indigenous people, but also all of the people that live in harmony with the land. Because also the slaves that came over here, they had their own indigenous value systems, and that's a whole nother talk that I could give for hours. So to me, it was sort of like, I may not understand the government structure, but I do understand the power and control wheel. I do understand the domestic, you know, like this, I do understand. Just like with my massage practice, it was sort of like I was trained to treat the pain and look elsewhere for the problem, and I was blindfolded. And so I kind of took the way that my mind worked for my individual clients, and I kind of turned it to us as a one people, as a nation. So I thought that was really interesting. And then on the other side, we have what equality looks like, which would actually probably look more like what we promised both the Iroquois Confederacy and the citizens of the United States in the beginning. So we're going to get into all that. This reminds me of the 2-row, and this is actually what ended up happening. And we all suffer for that. You know, we have more prisoners in the United States than anywhere else in the world. We treat our incarcerated like animals is the problem. We have a lot of problems here. So in the meantime, I'm calling around to all of these indigenous communities. And then I learned about the Turo Wampum Treaty. I guess I should get into the Peacemaker a little bit too, huh? I probably should tell a little bit, because how do we get into the Great Law and the Turo without the Peacemaker? Anyway, so I'm calling around. I'm trying to figure out what these laws of nature are. I find out about this Turo Wampum Treaty, which is a side-by-side relationship between the Iroquois Confederacy and the early United States government. And I start calling. I started at the Seneca Nation, calling on the phone, asking them what the laws, can you tell me what the laws of nature are? And this is when I realized that there was this great divide. So on our side, I got hung up on. They told me about John Locke. They told me about Hobbes. They told me about all of these philosophers of the time and natural law. When I called to the Seneca Nation, I called the cultural center there, and they're like, why are you asking me this? And I'm like, well, I read the first sentence of the Declaration of Independence, which is already, like, I'm sure they're really happy to hear from me. I'm calling from the United States. Yeah, anyway. And so, I'm like, it talked about the laws of nature, and I thought, well, if there's laws, then there's lawyers, and then, you know, and you're the lawyers, and then I learned about this treaty, and so they're like, hold on. So they transfer me to the director of the cultural center up there, and he's like, I'm like, can you tell me what the laws of nature are? And he's like, huh? We live by the law. And it was almost like, he was not rude at all, but it was almost like I just asked him the dumbest question he had ever heard in his life. But not in a rude way, but just kind of like, what? Are you really asking me that question? And I realized that this is something that they have always known, and it's something we don't know at all. And so on our side, it's like shrouded with all this like mystery. And it's very intellectual, and it's very like philosophical in nature versus being away, you know? And so that was my first realization that, like, wait a second, we are so far in understanding what this is. And so the Peacemaker, I guess I'll talk about him for just a second. So when the Confederacy was being formed, these nations were warring against each other, and there's a lot to it, and I think everybody should learn as much as possible about this story. But what the Peacemaker did is he went to the fiercest warriors, the fiercest leaders, and he gave them an opportunity to turn to peace. So they were cannibals. They were it was a lot. There was a lot going on. It was very dark. I love that the Peacemaker went to the absolute most, like, kind of disgusting human beings and offered them an opportunity to turn to the good. Because that means that no matter how far gone we are, we still have hope, right? And that theme of resurrection is kind of, not resurrection, but old made new, or dark and light, and is kind of throughout the world in many different cultures. But I really love that about the Peacemaker. And so what he did is he unified these 5 nations, and they became, you know, the Confederacy. But one of the things was, I read the first thing that he did was he stopped the children from fighting with each other, which I think is that's really cool. And then the second thing that he did was he knew that people would have differing opinions on things. And so one of the most important things that we can do as people is, like, politically, we may be diabolically different. You know, like, you may be one way and I may be completely the other way, but if we can both agree that we're human beings, then we have something in common. And that was the start. And then we're going to get into the Thanksgiving Address in a little while, the one that Loran shared with us earlier, and we're going to read it together. I love that about the Peacemaker, is that it was about bringing darkness to light and violence to peace. It's about, and I apply, you know, these nervous system principles in my mind. The way that I think about things is, you know, from aggression to peace. And we're in a very divided time right now, especially as a nation, as a world, and the idea of us finding common ground, I think sometimes is not even something that we're willing to consider, because we only have these two ways. But what I would like to potentially suggest is that there's actually another way, and it's the supreme law of these lands by constitution, and we'll get into all of that in a little bit. Oh, so when I called up there to the Seneca Nation, I talked to this lady. The birds are back there, but I'll just forget that, but I feel like it's important. When I got the phone number to the faith keeper at the Seneca Nation, I'm like going on and on. I saw this big white it was a whole thing, and I'm going on and on about all the things. And so she gives me the phone number to the faith keeper, and I'm so excited. It's later in the afternoon. I have a court day the next day. Anyway, we walk out of the courthouse. The entire country shuts down. COVID has hit. I get home, I pull my clothes out of the dryer, and I have washed the phone number of the faith keeper. And I was devastated. And I don't know if any of you are ever hard on yourselves because you're absent-minded professors, but I tend to do dumb things like this on a regular basis. And so here I am. I got the phone number to the faith keeper. Maybe I can finally get the answer to my question, and I wash it. And now the entire country, the whole world is shut down. And so there was a little self-flagellation that was happening at that moment. And there was this feeling of calm that kind of came that was like, if you want to learn the laws of nature, look to nature. And now in retrospect, I'm so glad that I washed the phone number to the faith keeper, because if I had gotten the phone number to the faith keeper, I would have called the faith keeper and I would have externalized wisdom from internal. So anyway, the next morning, it's pouring down rain outside in the morning time. And it's like 5 o'clock in the morning. It's pouring down rain. And these birds are just like singing their little hearts out. And I'm like, if I was this bird, I would be like, it's raining, I'm not going outside. I have other things to do, it's raining. But these birds, they have a responsibility to sing their bird song in the morning time, and they were born with a soul song inside of them. And they were not concerned about the storms outside of their life. They had a responsibility to sing their bird song. And so what I learned later was that when birds sing in the morning time, the frequency of the bird song permeates the cell walls of the plants, and it actually wakes them up so that they open to receive the nutrients from it's called the stomata. And so I thought that scientifically, I thought that was really cool to learn that, but how we could apply that to our own selves, that we're born with a soul song inside of us, and we have a responsibility to that soul song to permeate our environment versus allowing our environment inside of us, especially in chaos. Like, do you know what I mean? Coming to the heart and pushing the heart out to create a peaceful environment around us versus allowing the chaos that's around us to come inside of us. That was my big epiphany with the bird song. And then I learned later I saw that there are some teachings that talk about the bird song. And so the next thing I thought about with this laws of nature thing, who are the lawyers? Then I thought about all the nonprofits for our country that are fighting to protect the water, fighting to protect the land, fighting to protect the sky. And I just pulled this up. This is just a guesstimated number, $9.2 billion to protect the land. That the first sentence, which is the most important line of our nation, is spent to protect something that we're supposed to be founded on, this laws of nature and nature's God concept. So I thought that was kind of interesting, and I thought, how cool would it be if all of these nonprofits work together versus separately, because we're in a fragmented reality, but we live in a holistic truth. And so anyway, $7.8 to $9.2 billion annually is used to protect the environment that shouldn't need protection, because we're supposed to be a nation that honored the laws of nature. So I already shared that with you. I called around. I talked to elected officials, like face to face, like begged them to do something about all of this. Again, the indigenous communities all over were very encouraging and very warm. You're gonna have people everywhere that aren't open to like what you're talking about, but the amount of encouragement that I got, I didn't start this as a research project. I didn't even know it was a research project until it was almost finished. I didn't even know that there was like, that was a thing. Somebody was like, oh, your project? I was like, oh, it has a name. So I never took notes because it was personal. I just wanted to know what the hell they were talking about in the first sentence of the Declaration of Independence. And so there was a man, I want to say he was Dene, but I talked to him, we talked for a while, and he explained to me that I had been called to a path of a fight that's been a fight for hundreds of years. And he sang me a song in his traditional language, and it was about the wood rats, and about how the wood rats go down to the river together, they wash together, they play together, and they leave together. And it's not about individuals, it's about all of us as one humanity, and we all have to go home together. And that really touched me a lot. And so I learned about the two-row. Okay, so before we get into this, because I'm pretty sure this is a 36-minute video, but I wanted an indigenous voice to explain all of this, because I'm not as good of a storyteller, one, and then the rest of it should make more sense, you know.
My name is Rick Hill. I'm the Senior Project Coordinator at Deohahage, the Indigenous Knowledge Center at Six Nations Polytechnic. Today we're going to go back and take a look at the original treaty that was made between the Haudenosaunee and the Dutch. Some people say it happened in 1613. We're going to take a look at what did our ancestors agree to? Why was it important back then that they made such a treaty? And what does that treaty mean to us today? But it also raises some very important issues we have to think about. This is a photograph of the actual two-row wampum. I believe this is the one that is referenced in our oral history. Much like our relationship with our neighbors, it's kind of tattered and torn. There's some missing elements there. It's almost cut in two. But there's still a message there about these two paths, these two roads. The wampum still has a memory of what our ancestors had hoped for us. So we need to take a larger look at that. What does it mean to hold the two-row wampum? What's the nature of our relationship to our neighbors? What does it mean to be caught in the middle of these two paths? We're going to explore those ideas. I grew up, like a lot of people in our generation, hearing our leaders talk about the two-row wampum as the grandfather of all treaties, the defining moment between the ship and the canoe. The ship representing the Europeans, the canoe representing our ancestors, the native people. It became a powerful symbol. What a great way to exhibit, demonstrate the quality of this relationship. Two vessels traveling down the river right together, separate but equal. But the more I think about it, the more it makes me wonder, how separate are we? In many ways, we have this dichotomy of us and versus them. If you take a look at how we live today, we mimic the lives of the people on the ship. Many of the things that we do, it's not as simple to say, well, we're over on one side and you're on the others, because there's so many things that have crossed over. In our economy, in our education, in our language, our way of life, we've now become so interdependent. I wonder if the two-row image is still viable. I don't know about you, but I felt like I spent most of my life in the middle of those two rows. And there's an oral tradition about what happens when people fall in the middle, and they say there's no power on earth that can get them. It's only the Creator that can save them from that water. Well, after floundering in that water for 40 years, I'm wondering, is this our destiny? Do we just let our people fall in the water? Is there something else that's happening? Why are they falling into the water? Why can't they sit in their canoe comfortably? Why can't we bridge the canoe and the ship? Seems like most of my life I've done that, in the academy, but also in the longhouse. Go to chief's meeting, but then participate in a larger society. I work in museums, I'm an educator, and so I'm often confused about where am I firmly rooted in, because I'm also the result of the residential school era where people pulled away or moved away from their communities, grew up not speaking their language, not knowing that. So oftentimes I feel much like these people here, just treading water upside down. And the other reality is that our canoes become almost swamped with things from the ship. The river life is now polluted It doesn't do us any good to say that we have a right to catch a polluted fish. We have to ensure that the water's healthy for ourselves to be healthy. So if we're going to take a hardcore two-row wampum ideology, we have to get a whole bunch of stuff out of our canoe that's contaminating it. But we also have to understand that the two-row existed within a treaty context, within a cultural encounter context. This wampum belt was called the first sighting of the people with the pale faces. We don't know for sure which event it was attached to. Could have been 1524, when Verrazano came to our country, 1534, when Jacques Cartier came up to St. Lawrence, or 1609, when Henry Hudson came up to what's called the Hudson River. It's hard to say which one it relates to, but if you hear the story, look at the symbolism. There's two wide, what we call rafters. They're like the braces to the longhouse, and then there's a thinner one in the middle. And what the story says, that when our white brother arrived, he was quite sickly. Our job was to help stand him up. So imagine it's almost like two very strong men picking up their weaker younger brother. We gave them some medicine to make them stronger, and we tried to coexist in this land. If you take that story, compared it to Jacques Cartier's journal, what happened to his men when they showed up sick and how they were revived by the medicine that was given to them by the local people, it may be that event. It may be a combination of all of the above. But the most important thing is that it says, we didn't rush out to kill them. These people needed our help. We extended our indigenous knowledge, our traditional knowledge, in order to enable them to be healthy, so that hopefully we could communicate them with our strong minds. However, our relationship kind of fell apart pretty quickly. 1609, Samuel Champlain showed up, and along with some native allies, he began to attack the Haudenosaunee territory. This wampum belt was put together to commemorate that. You see these 5 hexagons, and then there's some lines at either end. Usually those lines it's almost like the intro and the conclusion to the belt, just to let you know it's a complete story. But it was the first time we saw firearms used, and several of our Mohawk leaders were killed as a result. And it created great antagonism, great fear between the Haudenosaunee and the French. We began to fight with our neighbors again when the Great Law was supposed to put fighting to an end. This is the drawing that Champlain did, showing his attacking of the Mohawks in 1609. You can see the circular fort to their village, and you can see the French with their firearms. It's hard to imagine how powerful a moment that must have been, to hear these great thundersticks blast, and to see this flash of light and smoke, and all of a sudden see the people next to you fall over with these big, gaping wounds. For people who lived probably 100 years in peace, this was a very defining moment. We had to make up our mind, are we going to make war, or are we going to make peace? This wampum belt talks about a treaty that was made between the Hurons, the Wyandots, and the Haudenosaunee in 1612. It said the treaty was made up in the headwaters of the Ottawa River. However, quickly the Hurons and Champlain turned on that and began to attack the Haudenosaunee. And they attacked some villages down in Onondaga country, came through Oneida country on their way there. So treaties are made, treaties are broken, but because of the instigation of the French, we began to be very distrustful of them. What I'm going to share with you is the oral history of the two-row wampum that really hasn't been well known. We have the internet version of the two-row, and it condenses everything down into very simplistic references. But there's actually quite a complex story, quite a long oral history attached to that. I learned that from this fellow here, Jake Thomas. He had learned it from his father, and his father learned it from his father. And it was recorded in this manuscript called The Fire, the Path, and the Chain. And it was translated and retranslated by Michael Foster, a linguist, using the help of Lorna Hill and a few other Cayuga speakers. And so this is the story. This is the real story of the two-row wampum that we need to understand. Ironically, it had these 2 passages in there that struck in my mind. First it said, it will put your minds at ease, that we still remember these words. This retelling of the two-row is supposed to be such a positive thing, such a hopeful thing, that will put our minds at ease, that we still maintain this tradition. I don't know about you, but my mind is seldom at ease when I look at the relationship between the Haudenosaunee and Great Britain, the Americans, or Canada, Ontario, and Caledonia. It seems like we're the only ones that remember this conversation that took place. And then it also said, the one who dwells in the sky, the Creator, he did not intend people who move but on the earth to torment one another. And so there was a spiritual motivation. War made the Creator unhappy, so he sent down into the minds of the people who made the two-row, make peace, call upon this great tradition of good-mindedness to restore sanity to our work. And the Dutch arrived in their huge ships. It must have been amazing to our people to see these things. almost, some people describe it as a cloud floating on the water with their big white sails. Ship larger than anything we'd seen before, just full of people, almost like a floating house. It was also amazing to them to see us, the people of the Longhouse, living in organized villages, having this form of governance, but also interested in engaging with them. We wanted to make peace with the Dutch because we got stung by the war with the French. So the oral history says that the whole purpose of here was to form a friendship with these newcomers. Between the Dutch and the Haudenosaunee, or the Ongway, we began to talk for quite some time, they say, because we realized if we continued to go the way that we're going, we're never going to live in peace. The Dutch wanted it because it was good for trade. We wanted it because that was our tradition. So what you have in mind is good, said the Ongway, the Mohawk man, who was first met to the Dutch. The Creator did not intend that we would live in discord. We should respect one another. Those are principles right out of the Great Law, and really right out of our creation story. So our ancestors had no other way to act but to enact these cultural principles. We didn't look at them, well, you're white, so therefore you're not of us. You don't count. You're not included in this. We took those principles and applied them to them. At one point they asked, what symbols are we going to go by? They said, first, we're going to greet our friendship and love, as the Creator intended. Friendship and love. Well, I know we haven't been feeling a lot of that with our neighbors, but that's the intention of the Tuba. Because if we have those things, we will then have peace between our people. It's going to be symbolized by the earth and the Creator's creation and its happenings. First, this was a little mystifying to me. What are they talking about? But you've heard that phrase, as long as the sun rises, as long as the water runs downhill, as long as the grass turns green, as long as nature continues its cycle, humans should continue to renew their peace with one another. Second, we're going to take each other by the hand, hold each other by the arm. This again is right out of the Great Law, this symbol of unity. We're linking our arms together. We're going to stand in union as one people. So we're going to seal the matter by taking each other by the hand. So holding hands and shaking hands becomes a very powerful metaphor to our people. And we remain brothers for as long as the earth lasts. Now when it comes to diplomatic language, it's all about brothers or brethren. Within our society, we have a matriarchal-based society. But what this means is the diplomacy. We're supposed to treat each other as if we're brothers, or if we're members of the one family. We will smoke the sacred tobacco the Creator made for us and pass the pipe around, so the smoke will rise and pierce the sky. This is a very common tradition of Haudenosaunee. Burning the original tobacco sanctifies the event. This is why old people used to say treaties were sacred matter. Well, I read all the treaties, and they didn't see a whole lot of sacred language in there, but this is what they meant. We're doing this because the Creator intends us to do it. He wants to see peace prevail. And so that when we come to one mind and perpetuate the peace, it's a great thing. And then we send a smoke up to Him to confirm that. Look what the people have done. And when He carries that message of hope, it makes the Creator feel good. So He is the one who's bearing witness to the agreement. I mean, you don't see a signature on the agreement, but it wouldn't happen if He didn't use His mind to reinforce our good mind. So the symbol of the true law, these two paths, is very important. We've now laid our vessels out parallel to each other, and so too will be with our beliefs. So what they did is they said they took all their authorities, their beliefs, their laws, their tradition, and dropped them into the appropriate vessel. The Dutch put theirs in the ship, we put ours in the canoe. But that we're running parallel to one another. We don't have authority over each other's cultures. We're supposed to treat each other fairly, respect our differences, to coexist. But they also realized we had to link these vessels together so one wouldn't try to get ahead of the other. Now some people say we're not supposed to steer each other's vessel, but when you link them together and they go down this river of life together, they're going to remain side by side. But the idea is that we're not going to bump into each other. So the Mohawk man said to the Dutchman, we shall put these boats in the water. They shall always be parallel. As long as there's a Mother Earth, this will be everlasting. To remain parallel, we recognize that they're here. We recognize that we're going to be attached to them. In fact, at one point they said, from this day forward, the children in the canoe are going to be related to the children in the ship. The grandchildren in the canoe are going to be related to the grandchildren in the ship. And boy, that sure comes true. We, in many ways, have become one people. So there's a long history, a long historical drama that took place when the Dutch arrived. There's a lot of contested history as to what took place. Some scholars don't believe that the 1613 date is valid, but we know for sure the Dutch were here, 1611 to 14. A couple of the Dutch captains came up the Hudson River to present-day Albany in 1613 in order to establish some kind of trading relationship, and they also developed a map that was produced 1614. On that map we can see that they identified the Mohawks as Makwa, that showed where their villages were, as compared to where their fort was on the river. A modern-day map shows the relative locations of the Mohawks and the Mohegans at this time, 1613. It really was Mohegan territory where we probably met them, but we were used to going there for trade, and there was these great flint mines down there. The Mohawks were very versed in that landscape. Plus that's our avenue down towards New Amsterdam, their village that they built on Manhattan. We had been interacting and trading with the Dutch in their locations. It was just in 1613 they come to our back door. But you have to ask with this first encounter, how much did we know about each other before we met? We were able to communicate. And why did we need to make this agreement in the first place? And ultimately, what did we agree to? And maybe I could add, what's that got to do with us today? All of these are great questions to contemplate. So the typical image of the Truro then, we have the Dutch ship on one side and the canoe of our ancestors on the other. We're traveling down this river of life together. We've got our vessels tied together. We're supposed to use our good mind to resolve any differences between us. In many ways, the original Truro was a trade agreement. They came here for trade. They wanted to ensure that they had peaceful trade. They manufactured goods, cast iron kettle versus a ceramic pot. And because we knew the French had these weapons, they had swords, they had armor, they had muskets, they had pistols, they had a lot of things that caused us damage. I think what we also realize is that we need to arm ourselves to defend ourselves better. And the only way to do that is have friendly relationships with people who are willing to trade for those matters. But they also talked about the meaning of the colors of the wampum belt. White and purple. White generally represents peace. Purple represents the darker things in life. But what they talked about here were these three white stripes. One representing the purity of thought, these good intentions. The other is our good mind, and that good mind creates these good thoughts. And then as a result of that, we would have good relationships and peace would prevail. So the background, this river of life, has these three elements to it: purity, good minds, and peace. But in the oral tradition, Dutchmen suggest, well, we've tied our vessels together with a rope. But you know, a rope is going to fray, it's going to break, so let's take a chain. You know, the Dutch has a long history of using chains in their ships, so they said, we're going to take this chain and tie our vessels together. And then the Mohawk man says, that's a good idea, that'll be strong. And you know what? The three links of this chain represent these ideas. The first link, we've established this friendship. We will become friends to one another. Second, we both have the good mind. We'll use this good mind to perpetuate our friendship. And the third link, and if we do that and we do it well, there will always be peace. So friendship, the good mind, and peace become the primary message of the treaty, the chain that ties our vessels together. They also said from time to time we need to renew these agreements. We will abide by our agreement as long as the sun always makes it bright on earth, so waters flow in a certain direction, and the wild grasses grow at a certain time of year. There's many variations of that phrase, but that was agreed to. That actually becomes common treaty language throughout North America. From time to time, as long as the earth exists, we shall renew our agreements so that people will know them. Well, this has been one of the problems. We keep advocating, let's renew this, but we haven't gotten a very favorable response. But by renewing our agreements, we can make those principles live. If we don't renew them, all of that goes away. What the Truro started then was a tradition of how we're supposed to relate to one another. The protocols that were developed from it. We'd always kindle the fire because it's a sacred. The fire itself and the smoke rising up signals that good minds are trying to gather together. We would condole each other for our losses. We would follow the principles of parade law and wipe the tears and clean the ears and the throat of our visiting delegates so that we have a good mind towards peace. There's a very specific agenda. There wasn't many surprises brought up. They said, this is what we're going to talk about. And then wampum was exchanged for each matter that we were to discuss. Wampum becomes the diplomatic tool by which peace is arrived at. It would bring wampum belts with requests. We would make our decisions, send those belts back with the decisions on it. And when a treaty was made, finalized, a special wampum belt was put together to commemorate that agreement. And we always had to come to one mind. So a matter would be laid in front of our nations. We would withdraw from the council and we would discuss among ourselves. We'd have a caucus. We never, ever addressed the matter right away. Some of these treaty councils could go up to several months because it's a big, intense discussion trying to come to one mind. Once we did, both sides agreed, then we would smoke the pipe because that, again, sanctifies the agreement. And of course, then you have to feed all the participants. Whoever kindles the fire is responsible for taking care of all the visitors. Sometimes we would kindle the fire in our territory. Other times it would be kindled at the Dutch fort or the English fort. But like all relationships, sometimes it's a little rocky. Rust would form on that chain from inattention. Sometimes we would do things to hurt one another. So a treaty became a quality of the relationship, not just a series of written documents or not just a series of wampum belts, but it's about how are we going to engage with one another. We're constantly making a pledge of friendship to one another, because sometimes, our people are mean to each other. We have to make up for that. We also had to ensure there was open communication. You can't have a good treaty relationship and be telling deceptive stories or lies. We also had to guarantee safe passage. You come to us, even during times of war, we're trying to resolve peace, you will be protected, but we expect the same. And then we would try to address the matters fairly. It's got to be a win-win situation. Everybody's got to get something out of this that they're looking for. And we would provide compensation when necessary. If we did harm to the people in the ship, we would make up for that. If they did harm to us, they would have to make up for that. And wampum was usually the way that was done, but it also could be trade goods, clothing, food, money. So the whole point of treaties is to make sure that justice is administered fairly. That nothing goes unaddressed. You don't let the wound fester, you have to address it. And in the end, we would then replant the tree of peace that the Creator asked us to do through the Great Law. So you have to understand we have this long legacy of this engagement because of the Truro. It began around 1613, gets remanifested with the Great Britain in 1664. We have a whole series of treaties then of our relationship with them. And we also have treaties with the United States in 1794. And after the War of 1812, Great Britain came back with a new pledge of the Crown and a wampum belt. So wampum, diplomacy, treaty making, all of that started with the Truro in terms of our engagement with the Europeans, and it continues to this very day. Their way of recording is to write things down in this sample of the 1701 Nanpan Treaty. For many years, this had kind of disappeared from the British archives, and they found it again, and it's very telling, because two different worlds are at play, two different ways of looking at that. This is why our ancestors said, you record it your way, you write it down, we're going to record it our way in the wampum belt. Unfortunately, sometimes these two different documents say different things. Ours is a more comprehensive overview of what's going on. There's all of the language that led up to the actual signing of the agreement. Usually the written documents are codified under European law. It has European language in there that has concepts, legal concepts, that would be very difficult to translate to our leaders even back then. So you have to ask, what did our leaders agree to? How well did they comprehend the English or the Dutch terminology? Sometimes what they agreed to wasn't what the paper said. Sometimes the translator didn't translate well, so it makes it very difficult to come to one mind on even what the historical treaties are. This is the map of the Nanpan hunting land area. Now, if you read their documents, we gave all of this land to the Crown. We ceded it to them forever. If you read our documents, the oral history, it says that we allowed the king to put his hand over the land. You can barely see the land as that dotted line, looks a little yellowish line on the lower left part of this drawing. We said wherever he put his fingers, he could build a fort to help protect our right to hunt in that land. So we have two very different ideas. If you go to court with just the written document, you could miss half the story. This wampum belt, although it's 2 rows, maybe symbolizes more the kind of arduous journey we began to have with the Dutch and the English, the French, the Americans and the Canadians. The intent is still there, traveling in 2 rows, but now all of a sudden there's all kinds of variances of that path. And you have to understand that history is complex because how the French understood it, the Dutch understood it, the British, the Americans and the Canadians, their understanding of even their own history sometimes is not consistent. When you hear the narrative of the 2 row, it includes this idea of a covenant. So the covenant started very early with the Dutch. We codified the covenant chain, the thing by which we link our arms with Great Britain. Probably goes back to 1664. So about 50 years after we made agreements with the Dutch, we're then making agreements with the English. They're picking up the covenant chain, or they're picking up the 2 row. They're picking up this treaty relationship after they defeated the Dutch. Then after the British got defeated by the Americans in the States, the Americans picked up the 2 row in the covenant chain. So the covenant chain has many of the symbols and ideas that were born in the 2 row wampum. We can see this figure there that's holding this path or holding this chain that connects our people together. Our arms are linked now through this covenant chain. And that we protect our head and our heart and our relationship to one another. And by linking the arms, we become like one people. And then this path, or this road that connects us is always open and protected so that we will keep peace alive. So that concept from the 2 row gets remanifested in the covenant chain. This is the personal seal of Sir William Johnson. He was the Superintendent of Indian Affairs, the Imperial Indian Agent. We can see one drawing shows him giving a peace medal to the native delegates. They gather at the council tree. There's a heart on the tree, there's a chain attached to both sides of that. We can see the council fire burning, the pipe laying on the ground to be smoked. And in the seal, we see the same thing. We see now the Six Nations hands joining the chain, along with the one hand with a cuff that represents the English. We can see then the pipe, the ever-growing tree, see the council fire with the smoke coming out of it, and we can see the ship and the canoe. My point here is that the British understood very well the concept of the two-row. They understood the metaphors, they understood the meaning. You won't find a specific reference to the two-row wampum in the British documents, but you will find that they did understand the oral history and the concepts behind it. Despite the two-row, despite the covenant chain, our people have learned some hard lessons about treaty making. Joseph Brant, who was quite zealous in trying to maintain the treaty relationship with Great Britain, had this to say after the American Revolutionary War. The Mohawks have on all occasions shown their zeal and loyalty to the great king, yet they have been very badly treated by his people. Indeed, it is very hard when we have let the king's subject have so much of our land for so little value. We are tired out in making complaints and getting no redress. So it raises the question, what happens when your two-row treaty partner fails to keep their side of the treaty? Well, then the covenant chain and the principles of the treaty become encrusted with rust, because it's as if all of the issues we have, there's no attention paid to them. There's no justice there. So this is what they meant. When you have to renew our treaties, we have to knock that rust off the chain. We have to polish it so that it's bright. It means that the agreement among our people is renewed and strengthened again. If we don't, it's going to rust through and it's going to break. So here at Grand River, we have to ask ourselves, what is the nature of our relationship with Great Britain? Do we have a two-row wampum relationship with them? Do we have a covenant chain relationship with them or not? Sometimes it seems like we're the only ones who remember what our ancestors agreed to. In the city of Albany, where many of these treaties were made, is this statue. It actually becomes the seal for the city. So we can see the Dutch ship. We see a Dutchman on one side, and we can see what I believe is a Mohawk on the other side. Below them is this word, assiduity. So when I checked it out in the dictionary, because I didn't know what it meant, it had this definition: constant attention to what one is doing. So they understood that. The constant attention between the Dutchman and the Mohawk, between the colonists and the Haudenosaunee, between the Europeans and natives is very important. This is what it would take to have a good treaty relationship. It's encoded right there in a monument in Albany, but a lot of people seem to forget it. So when I was young, as in this photograph in 1973, our leaders kept telling this story about the two-row. But all they had were these reproductions of the wampum belts, because most of the belts had been taken away by anthropologists and scholars in museum collections. And it was quite startling to me to realize this great history, this great story that these old men had in their head. So I tried to learn it as best I could. Then I came across this fellow, Seth Newhouse. He was quite a linguist. He wrote down the creation story, the great book, we all in the Mohawk language back in the 1880s and 1900s. But look at this photograph of him. The one I'm showing you, this is what other people need to understand. We understand our history. We know what's going on. We have our wampum belts. We know what takes place. And to us, many times, the written history verifies what we're saying. And no amount of pretending about whether the two-row is legitimate or not, or whether it happened in 1613 or not, can deny this underlying principle. Trade and peace we take for the same thing. My cousin Alan Michelson did this two-row video installation. He came to Grand River, he rented the river tour boat, and he photographed what you could call the native side, the community side of Grand River. And then he also photographed the other side, and began to notice our side is green, it's gardens, it's natural, the Carolinian forest. The other side is all developed, docks and homes right up to the shoreline. And he's trying to make a point about the river that was once sustaining our people, the river of life, has now become this great divide. They live well on their side, and we still suffer from not having the justice of the two-row recognized. So he's raising this question about this in his art installation. It reminded me that in a recitation of the two-row, there was this passage. It says, perhaps in the days to come, some of your people would like to get in my canoe. It's the Mohawk man speaking to the Dutchman. But I don't think they like the ways of my canoe. He said it's very narrow and it goes down the river quite swiftly. This kind of mystified me for a while. Till I realized one day when I was in a canoe and turned over, and I found myself going down into the water, is that in order to exist in the indigenous canoe, you have to be in absolute harmony and balance with everything else in it. Perhaps a number of my people would like to get into your large boat because of its size. They might like being in your boat. Oh, it's so big and carries so many things. And they were realizing that people are going to want to not necessarily be in the vessel where they came from. So here's what they decided. People who get into your boat will be guided by it. Your people who will get into the canoe will be guided by the ways of the canoe. No matter what vessel you find yourself in, you will be governed by its rules, its laws, its beliefs, its traditions. But anybody can exist within those vessels if they come with a good mind. But for us, when we go to the university, and we go into a corporate world, and we travel out away from the canoe, this says we'll be governed by their laws. We're not supposed to indigenize their place. It's their place. However, when they come to our canoe, then our laws and our treaties will govern. So this is a very interesting thing when we look at who we are today, where we're headed, where most of our people are, and are we forgetting some of this stuff? That there is this distinctive canoe-ness and this distinctive shipness, that we have to respect each other, but not impose our will upon each other. I got this image from the internet. So here's the Truro. It was meant for us to walk side by side and extend peace, mutual respect, and friendship. That yes, that was the intention of this Truro, but we don't feel that today. There's not much peace between our people, certainly not much mutual respect. There's a growing friendship, I believe. There's a lot of young people from the ship who want to be sincere allies to the Haudenosaunee, other Native people. I feel this is growing, and it's true. And now with this Truth and Reconciliation recommendations, and with the UN Declaration of Indigenous Rights, we have a roadmap of how we build peace, respect, and friendship between the people. I was involved in Mohawk College, wanted to do this Mohawk wall installation from floor to ceiling using this Truro. But they said they wanted images of Native people throughout the whole thing. And at first I was thinking, well, why would you want to do that? It's supposed to be in a ship or in a canoe. As we began to place the photographs in all of these spaces, we realized it's more indicative. This is where our people are. Many of them are caught in the middle. Many of them are connected to both worlds. You know, there was a prophecy that when you put your foot in the canoe and one in the ship, you have to be very careful because a big wind's going to come, push those vessels apart, and you're going to fall in that deep, dark water between. In many ways, our Aboriginal education programs are trying to be the lifeline to all of those people caught in the middle. We can no longer just see them cast into the water and forget about them. We have to do something to encourage them, to make up your mind. What vessel do you want to be in? And this isn't about blood quantum, because the Truro says, whatever vessel you find yourself in, you'll abide by the rules of that vessel. Which to me means if the people without a clan, the non-native people, want to come and live well in the canoe and they believe these things, they will be governed by our law of inclusion, of fairness, and respect. But instead, we seem to be applying some racist principles and some exclusionary ideas, and it seems like we want to cast people out of the canoe, people who can be an attribute to that indigenous way of life. And at the same time, we let a lot of our young people go over into the ship without a safety line. So we have to really rethink that space between these two roles. What are the possibilities for that? What do we do about the people in the middle? What do we do about the quality of life within the canoe? What do we do when the ship begins to impact on the quality of our life? So the story of the Truro is not over. Yes, it was made a long time ago. Yes, the world is very different than it is today. But it seems to me it gave us some principles, some things to think about what kind of people we want to be in the future, and how we have to work hard to ensure that our canoe will continue to flow in healthy waters, full of healthy, vibrant people who believe in one thing most of all, that peace is the most important way for humans to exist in this world. Donington.
I learned about the Truro Wampum Treaty. I also learned that I'll just do my interpretation again, and if I'm wrong, please stop me. So the Great Law is in the shape of a tree. In order for us to have done this Truro, we had to travel through the roots of truth in order to seek shelter under the shade of the tree of peace. So my interpretation from what I can tell, is that the United States was actually created by treaty through this League of Friendship. Because when I read the Great Law, which it's something that's spoken, not necessarily written, but there are protocols that are kind of laid out in it. The Great Law stands alone, and so it is solid. And so it talks about adopting individuals, it talks about adopting nations, and all of these things would have been temporary. So as long as you are under the shade of this tree of peace, as long as you're in harmony with the Great Law and the original instructions, then you can remain under the shade of this tree of peace. But if you move outside, then you have forfeited your right to be part of this, right? So if what I'm understanding is like none of the clan mothers, like even within the Confederacy, you can't go against the Great Law, or you can step outside. And that's not my side, because I'm in the ship. I'm stuck in the ship. We're all stuck in the ship, which is why I want to bring this message to us, the ship people, to understand our responsibility to our side of this two-row wampum treaty. And so this is my understanding, that the Great Law stands as it is. In order for us to have become a nation, to begin with, we had to travel through these roots of truth. We had to agree to abide by the laws of nature. We had a comprehension in mind and in heart of what it meant to be in harmony with these things. And we'll get into what this has led me to in my own interpretation of what this first sentence of the Declaration of Independence is actually talking about. And so it's part of why I'm an accidental revolutionary, because I really didn't mean to get here, right? So when the United States stepped outside of the shade of the Tree of Peace, well, we violated this agreement that we would be in harmony with all of that. And I believe because the founders, and there's a lot, this is all controversial. What I'm saying is controversial. However, I have documents, there are words on paper. The way that the U.S. law system works is words on paper. Whether they wrote these words on paper and then they were liars, that is not our responsibility. Our responsibility is to fix the wrongs of the past and the present. And so if the founding fathers said that we are going to be concerned about your children's children's children and our children's children's children, and they lied, it doesn't matter, because on paper, the way U.S. law works is we have a responsibility to the written word, which we're going to get into the treaty that I found that I'm very excited about. And so this is my understanding that the true United States is actually a friend of nature and a friend of the indigenous people. I know, but that's what I have come to see with my research. So let's go to the next slide. I'm working on this stuff. I'm calling all these people. I'm trying to figure this out. I learned about the two-row wampum treaty. But what I find out is on the U.S. side, scholars have determined that this is a myth. It didn't happen. It's not real. The Confederacy has wampum. They have oral record. They have all these stories. So I'm learning all these stories over this period of time. I'm taking all this information in and I'm learning. But I'm also learning that, one, none of us know any of this information, and two, scholars have been either trying to prove or disprove the existence of this two-row wampum treaty for a long time. And so what I found is that there's no connecting that this actually happened on our side. And Sonny mentioned Article 6, Section 2 of the U.S. Constitution, that all the treaties that were signed prior to the signing of this Constitution are supreme law of the land, which gives the United States citizens standing in order to hold our government officials accountable to these original agreements, to the laws of nature, to this relationship, to the original intentions of the United States. And it gives us standing to hold our government accountable to the promises that we made, not only to the indigenous people, but also to us, we the people. And so I'm working on all this stuff. As far as I know, our government, nobody's talking to me. Everybody's hanging up on me. Nobody's returning any of my emails or anything. Well, I meet a Cherokee person, a Cherokee brother, and and so he tells me that there was a senator that passed away, and this book is a Senate resolution that gets dropped off at his mother's house, and he has all these documents. And so he shares this book with me, right? And I get to flip through it. And if you look, this is why we watch the videos, so that I don't have to explain a lot of the things that were said. So this is the Treaty of Peace, and this is where they buried their weapons of war. Did we talk about that? Yeah. As far as I know, this is the Mohawk chief and clan mother. This is the wampum of friendship. Okay, and this is George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, and Benjamin Franklin. And if you notice, they're standing and they're sitting, and so that means that they're teaching and they're learning. Okay, and so let's go ahead to the next slide. Oh yeah, here we go. Okay, go. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so that was a page to the original book, but then I guess what I found out in the National Archives, this is actually a Senate resolution that happened in 1987, where our government actually acknowledges all of what I'm talking about. And this is a over 300 page document. It's a PDF file, and actually if you do that little thing, you can just have that information. And it talks about the ship, and it talks about the canoe, and how we modeled our government from the Great Law of Peace. And actually, I met a lady, and I don't know if this is true or not, but she was Danae, and she told me that she had been told by her nation that the Confederacy was actually upstairs while we were writing our Constitution, and there was a translator coming down and helping us to write it. I don't know if that's true or not, but from everything that I've learned about the kindness that was shared with us, it would not surprise me if we were helped to make sure that these things were written, correctly. So this Senate resolution blew my mind, because now, not only have I been hung up on 1,000 times, and scholars are disagreeing about whether or not this is even true, I found out that the Senate, where, up there in DC, they actually know all about this. So this isn't a big secret. This isn't just something that the Iroquois Confederacy is talking about. This is something that our government also knows about as soon as 1987. So I thought that was really, really interesting. But there's still no treaty that affirms that there's this two-row wampum treaty, this League of Friendship that actually has happened, right? And so I learned a lot. And at one point I decided that I was going to stop going to mostly Seneca is where I was going to try to, get this information, and YouTube and all that stuff. And I was going to go into our archives and see what I could find. And so, because it's our responsibility, these are promises that our forefathers made to the Confederacy for this good mind, for this relationship, for this laws of nature conversation. So it's our responsibility to hold our government, because the government works for we the people, and not we the people work for them, unless you're actually a government employee and then you work for the government. And so I'm like, okay, I live in Virginia. I'm not far from DC. I'm close to Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, George Washington, all those characters of the beginning there. And so I went to Monticello, and I was like, they teach the kids in school that the earth is dirt, the soil is dirt, and the dirt is non-living. And I don't know if this is universal across the place, but there's 50 million children that go to public school, and if 50 million children that go to public school are learning that the soil is dirt and the dirt is non-living, I know as a public school student that they're teaching a fragmented truth to a holistic reality, which is actually, it's a spiritual thing. It shapes a worldview, and it leaves us in a lot of confusion. And so, it's one of the many issues that I've found, but all this research is 7 years worth of, I'm in my 7th year of this. So I'm up at Monticello, I'm telling the lady, I want to see everything that you have on natural law or laws of nature. I want to see everything that you have. And everything that you have on Jefferson and the Native people. And I cannot remember what book I opened, because she was like, here we go, and I'm all over, and there's stacks and stacks, and I've been hung up on by all of our government. But then I go to Monticello, which is, Montpelier, Thomas Jefferson's place. And there's sections in the library of all this. And so she's like, you can access the National Archives online, right? And I was like, no, I didn't. So anyway, I can't remember what I saw, but whatever it was that I saw, I was like, ooh, I'm going to look that up. And so I went into our National Archives, and I typed in chain of friendship, because I was just, just for fun to see what would pop up. And here comes this newspaper clipping. This is from the Pennsylvania Gazette, which Benjamin Franklin started. And a few months after he wrote this little article in the newspaper, he started the Poor Richard's Almanac. The Supreme Court actually used to be held on astrological alignments, which I thought was really interesting. The United States was created for the common man, because the difference between the common man and the elite is they have all of this like esoteric knowledge or whatever, but it was supposed to be that we were sovereign too. Like as human beings, we were sovereign to the Creator, and we can get into the First Amendment as long as I don't run out of time. Anyway, so here it is, and here's this newspaper clipping, and I see that a treaty was entered into with them. This is some of the chiefs of the 5, now 6 nations as ambassadors from their great council, having been in town since a few days after the honorable proprietor's arrival. A treaty was entered into with them in order to renew the ancient chain of friendship between them and us. And I'm like, well, there it is. And so I get so excited because this ancient chain of friendship is something that we don't acknowledge. We do in word, maybe, but it's not something that we acknowledge on in a solid.
Binding.
Yeah, it's not binding like it was intended to be binding. And so anyway, so I see this ancient chain of friendship and I get so excited because, scholars have been looking for this for a really long time. And I go into our archives and I start looking for this treaty, and it is not there. But I know it happened. And in order to renew something, you have to have already done it, right? And so I go into the archives, I see the Treaty of 1722, I see the Treaty of 1736, I see the Treaty of 1744, but I don't see the Treaty of 1732, and I know that it happened because Benjamin Franklin put it in the newspaper. And so I call all the 6 nations and try to, not all 6, actually I called the 5 because Tuscarora I didn't call Tuscarora, I called Tuscarora later, and so I am like, hey, I realize this is a few hundred years ago, but do you have any memory of what happened in 1732? And nobody knew. And so then I got even more stubborn because at this point I'm on this adventure. Because it's a mind tweak. It's just like a perpetual mind tweak, and the more you think you're right, but I know it happened because it said that it happened. And so anyway, so I start learning everything I can learn about Benjamin Franklin. The only thing I remembered about him was that he flew a kite during a storm and there was lightning or something. So I found out that he started the Library Company of Philadelphia. And so I reached out to the Library Company of Philadelphia. I explained to them about how I believe that the first sentence of the Declaration of Independence is actually a formula of revolution. And I believe that if we had honored this agreement, we would have a holistic system of government, everything that it regulates. We wouldn't be a fragmented system. We would have holistic care in education, in medicine. We would be caring for the earth. This isn't something that we would have to learn. It would be something that we already know. And it takes away from our sovereignty to be enslaved to the system that we're living in. And so anyway, there we go. So there it is. Poor Richard's Almanac, which I thought was kind of cool that he printed this, and it was about the poor man, the idea was us on the underbelly or whatever, that we actually mattered as human beings and that we were sovereign. And so this idea of freedom and sovereignty to what is, and for the common man, not for the elite. Okay, so this is where things get a little bit interesting. So I find out that Harvard has done a Harvard review. They've done a judicial review. I have no idea if this particular thing was about my letter of questions because no one responded to me. But as far as I know, I have not met anyone talking about the Declaration of Independence and the laws of nature and knocking on the door of the government. And maybe it's happened and I just haven't met them, and I hope that I do because we're probably soulmates. But anyway, so this is talking about, I think it's Judge Thomas. And this is where I'm like, oh shit. Okay, so here we go. So he talked about how natural law served as a background, but they talk about natural law as though it's John Locke and Hobbes, right? It's a philosophy. And so it says it served as a background in our Declaration, and it helped form our Constitution, but it does not have an appropriate role directly in constitutional adjudication, which is untrue because the United States exists by treaty, from my understanding, through the Great Law. It would have never happened. We would have never been if we had not been welcomed through this chain of friendship. And then it says, recent confirmations hearings have abounded with pledges never to impose personal convictions upon the law, lest the judicial hopeful be maligned for her brazen willingness to exercise moral judgment. And so I did not like what I read at all. I called Harvard quickly, and I let them know about my research, and I let them know that I disagreed and that I could prove it. So in the meantime, I have sent an email. I've talked to the Library Company of Philadelphia. I'm asking him about this Treaty of 1732. Do you have it? He's like, I don't have it. I'm like, if you find it, please keep me in mind, because this could change. It changes our interpretation of our Constitution. And so anyway, I read this. I'm a little warm because now the very tippy top of our government is saying that the laws of nature are not important and there's no legal adjudication to that. Well, their responsibility is to protect our right to life, and they cannot protect our right to life if they are literally poisoning both the people and the planet. And so, Harvard also hung up on me, by the way. I shared all of my things with her, and I let her know that I read the First Amendment, and it says that I have, this is why I'm accidentally in revolution. So the First Amendment says we have a right to request a redress and express our grievance. Well, I had a stupid question 7 years ago, which was, what are they talking about in the first sentence of the Declaration of Independence, which I have continually been hung up on and no one's given me an answer to. I also read that if you can't get a redress and express your grievance, and they have like a period of time where they're supposed to change something, that means your government has become a tyrant and you're supposed to seek help, which I have actually done. I'm exercising another treaty that's international that I'll have to talk about another time. So I'm like, remember, I got a GED. I'm a massage therapist. I'm a mom. Like, this isn't my field of whatever, but here I am finding myself in all of this. And so the lady at Harvard, she's like, ma'am, I just want to commend you on how hard you've worked on this. I can tell that you really know what you're talking about. Unfortunately, just like the Supreme Court, I now have to hang up on you too. And so what's interesting about documents, right, is that this is back to that Senate Resolution 76, and it actually defines all under the authority of the natural law, the ultimate spiritual law of the universe. So there's actually a definition for this. So I was pretty excited about that. Okay, and so my buddy Max Moeller, many months later, well, it was probably 4 months, he said, I don't know how I missed these back in January, but I hope it's better late than never. While I forget the particulars of the treaty you were searching for, today I found not one but two treaties from 1732. They are part of our Pierre Eugene, I can't pronounce any of that, but you're welcome to look at that. Okay. So for me, I've been trying to build this case because I would like to request a redress to express my grievance, that I had to do all of this research, that I could have done many other things with my life other than trying to figure out what in the hell they were talking about in that first sentence. And so now I'm a little, I'm aggrieved by this because I spent a lot of time on this, sometimes 40 hours a week, plus working a job, plus being a mother. It's been a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. And so for me, it's really hard to see actually, but it says, this actually mimics our Article 6, where it's saying that all the people and power are, and it says to treat the Indians as we have done, and to be of one blood and of one body, of which there's no distinction. And so for me, I was like, mic drop, it's over. Because at this point, the Supreme Court's saying, oh no, there's no legal whatever. And we're talking about in this treaty to be of one blood, and I talked to a hematologist, what does it mean to be of one blood? And he's like one blood, come on, it's done. So this treaty is very interesting. Again, there's a QR code if you want to. I believe that this is all about the covenant chain. This is all about the agreement that we entered into, and granted it's in 1732. I reached out to an attorney that I know, and I asked him what happens if a treaty is missing for a few hundred years and it resurfaces. Does it stand as it was written? And he said, well, hypothetically, yes, there's probably a lot of red tape. What are the details of the treaty? And so I was like, oh, well, let me take a look, because, you know, I got to One Blood and everything I needed was right there in that one word. So I started like reading through it, and I was kind of rushed, even though I had many months to prepare for this. It just kind of snuck up on me. So I tried to screenshot the things that I needed, but you can look at the whole treaty. It's 24 pages if you want to. There's a part in there where it talks about how there were 2 indigenous people that have been killed in the Northern Territory, and it grieved them as though we were brothers of the same mother, which I thought was really interesting, because it wasn't father, because there's a lot of fathery things that when we talk about our history, but it actually says that we were brothers of the same mother. It talks about how it wasn't just about land acquisition, it was about the spirit of family. This is, in my opinion, probably why this treaty was missing for a few hundred years, because it's got all these details that later treaties didn't have. And then it says right here, this league and chain of friendship, and it talks about the perpetual for your children's children's children, with all your children's children's children to all generations, along with remembrance. It's like forever and ever and ever, for your children's children's children and our children's children's children, as long as the heavens and moon and sun and stars and earth endure, which is a really long time. It talks about if there is any evil-minded people, here it is, if there's any evil-minded people that do any harm to you, which would be the native people, that we will treat them like they've hurt our own blood at this point. And so I haven't done a lot of research into this, but I did hear that Andrew Jackson waited until George Washington died to start the Indian Removal Act, because it's not the United States without this Two-Row Wampum Treaty. That's what I have come to learn to be true. So this is a missing treaty. I called right before Christmas to call the Law Library of Congress to make sure that I wasn't full of crap, and they do not have it either. I'm hoping that the Mohawks recently received it, and it's going to, I'm really hoping that it's going to do something, because this is actually, it's on both sides. And so I believe that as Americans, we have a responsibility to hold our government accountable to the grandfather of all treaties, which enter this Treaty of 1794. It says all Indians. And inside this treaty too, it talks about how if they're a friend of the Iroquois Confederacy, then they're a friend to us. And so I want to say at one point, wasn't there like 24 nations up to like 54, and there's like stars and stuff? I've had a very specific focus, so I've tried not, there's so much to learn in a lifetime. But anyway, so it's all natives that align with this great law, which is a good mind and a peaceful heart. And so, anyway, so there's that. That's very exciting. I feel a little bit like National Treasure, but I found the damn thing. So I didn't find it. Max found it, actually. So Max gets the credit, and the library company in Philadelphia, and my buddy Benjamin Franklin, because I really do believe that he really respected the wisdom of the great law. And so I believe that they meant this promise, because I had no reference to have found any of this information if they did not mean the promise. I would have never been able to find it, because I didn't even know it existed. Again, back to Article 6 of the Constitution, which is like, us. It's our Constitution. We, the people, have a responsibility to that. And like, how different would it be, right? To consider 7 generations, children's children's children, on both sides, means that our breast milk wouldn't be full of microplastics, for example. Okay, so we'll go to the next slide. Okay, so this is what's really cool about this Thanksgiving address. The Thanksgiving address does not violate the First Amendment, which says no establishment of religion, which I find really fascinating, because we have a little bit of Christian nationalism going on right now, and it's actually in direct violation of, 1, the Two-Row, and 2, the vision that the United States was kind of So what I was thinking that we could do, which might be fun, is that we kind of sit. What time is it? Because I don't want to run out of time.
4:43.
Okay, well we can do this, right? Can you see that? Can anybody see it?
It's a little far away.
Okay, well those of you that can see it, what I was thinking was we could say it together, if that's okay. And then afterwards, and then we'll say, and now our minds are one. And I don't want to take something that's like sacred and make it sort of like an elementary school thing, but I think that it's really cool to consider, and we've only heard it in the Mohawk language. And so today we have gathered and we see that the cycles of life continue. We have been given the duty to live in balance and harmony with each other and all living things. So now we bring our minds together as one as we give greetings and thanks to each other as people. And now our minds are one. So who can read the next one?
The Earth Mother. We are all thankful to our mother, the earth, for she gives us all that we need for life. She supports our feet as we walk upon her. It gives us joy that she continues to care for us, as she has from the beginning of time. To our mother, we send greetings and thanks.
Now our minds are one.
The waters, we give thanks to all the waters of the world for quenching our thirst and providing us with strength. Water is life. We know its power in many forms: waterfalls and rains, mists and streams, rivers and oceans. With one mind, we send greetings and thanks to the Spirit of water.
Now our minds are one.
The fish. We turn our minds to the fish, to all the fish life in the water. They were instructed to cleanse and purify the water. They also give themselves to us as food. We are grateful that we can still find pure water, so we turn now to the fish and send our greetings and thanks.
Now our minds are one. You're not good.
Now we turn toward the vast fields of plant life. As far as the eye can see, the plants grow, working many wonders. They sustain many life forms. With our minds gathered together, we give thanks and look forward to seeing plant life for many generations to come.
Now our minds are one. Okay, we can go to the next slide because it's a long thing. If I go over a few minutes, is that okay?
No, of course.
Are you sure? Okay. Just a few. You want to go next?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we're here.
The sun.
Here.
Well, the food plants.
Yeah.
With one mind, we turn to honor and thank the food plants we harvest from the garden. Since the beginning of time, the grains, vegetables, beans, and berries have helped the people survive. Many other living things draw strength from them too. We gather all the plant foods together as one and send them a greeting of thanks. Now our minds are one.
The medicine herbs. Now we turn to the medicine herbs of the world. From the beginning, they were instructed to take away sickness. They are always waiting and ready to heal us. We are happy they are still among us. There are still among us those special few who remember how to use these plants for healing. With one mind, we send greetings and thanks to the medicines and to the keepers of the medicines. Now our minds are one.
The animals, we gather our minds together to send greetings and thanks to all the animals live life in the world. They have many things to teach us as people. We are honored by them when they give up their lives so we may use their bodies as food for our people. We see them near our homes and in the deep forests. We are glad they are still here, and we hope that it always will be so.
Now
our minds are one.
We now turn our thoughts to the trees. The earth has many families of trees who have their own instructions and uses. Some provide us with shelter and shade, others with fruit, beauty, and other useful things. Many people of the world see a tree as a symbol of peace and strength. With one mind, we greet and thank the tree life. Now our minds are one.
Birds. The birds. We put our minds together as one and thank all of the birds who move and fly about over our heads. The Creator gave them beautiful songs. Each day they remind us to enjoy and appreciate life. The eagle was chosen to be their leader. To all the birds, from the smallest to the largest, we send our joyful greetings and thanks.
Now our minds are one.
The four winds. We are thankful to the powers we know as the four winds. We hear their voices in the moving air as they refresh us and purify the air we breathe. They help us to bring the change of seasons. From the four directions they come, bringing us messages and giving us strength. With one mind, we send our greetings and thanks to the four winds.
Now our minds are one.
The sun. We now send greetings and thanks to our eldest brother, the sun. Each day without fail, he travels the sky home, east to west, bringing light of a new day. He is the source of all the fires of life. We are one mind. We send greetings and thanks to our brother, the sun.
Now our minds are one.
Grandmother Moon, we put our minds together to give thanks to our oldest grandmother, the moon, who lights the nighttime sky. She is the leader of women all over the world, and she governs the movement of the ocean tides. By her changing face we measure time, and it is the moon who watches over the arrival of children here on earth. With one mind, we send greetings and thanks to our grandmother, the moon.
Now our minds are one.
Get closer.
Get close.
The enlightened
To the
teacher.
stars.
All the stars. We give thanks to the stars who are spread across the sky like jewelry. We see them in the night, helping the moon to light the darkness and bringing dew to the gardens and growing things. When we travel at night, they guide us home. With our minds gathered together as one, we send greetings and thanks to the stars.
Now
Our minds are one.
Is it mine?
Sure.
The enlightened teachers. We gather our minds to greet and thank the enlightened teachers who have come to help throughout the ages. When we forget how to live in harmony, they remind us of the way we are instructed to live as people. With one mind, we send greetings and thanks to these caring teachers. Now our minds are one.
The Creator. We now turn our thoughts to the Creator, or Great Spirit, who sends greetings and thanks for all the gifts of creation. Everything we need to live a good life is here on Mother Earth. For all.
Oh, it cut off somewhere. Yeah, for all. I don't know where the rest of it is.
And that is all. No, just kidding.
Now our minds are
Now our minds
Minds
are one.
one.
And I love this, that the closing words, anybody can read it. I just love
Go
it.
ahead.
Okay. We have now arrived at the place where we end our words. Of all the things we have named, it was not our intention to leave anything out. If something was forgotten, we leave it to each individual to send such greetings and thanks in our own way.
No, our minds are
I
one.
love that, because it's like, if we forgot anything, we're good. So anyway, I love this, and I can repeat the first sentence of the Declaration of Independence now that we know about the two-row, and we know about the Thanksgiving Address, and these are the words that come before all else. So these would have been said, this would have been done, there was ceremony around these treaties, and so these words would have been said, they would have been understood when we entered into these treaties. And I love this so much. Yeah, I was going somewhere with that, and I just totally like
The opening words.
Back to the first sentence. Okay, so remember. Okay, so it says when in the course of human events, it becomes necessary, which means it's no longer an option, right? Necessary for one people. In order for us to be of one people, we have to be of one mind, and to be of one mind and one heart. I feel like this really seals that conversation up a little bit, and I think I believe that they meant the promise. I really do. And it's sort of like, hey, this U.S. thing is an experiment. If we screw up, like, we give it back. Anyway, and so of one people to dissolve, which is a peaceful process. We actually just shift democratic allegiances, which. Anyway, to dissolve the political bands that have bound us to another, and to assume the separate yet equal. This reminds me of the 2-row, separate yet equal. Station is actually a military holding place, according to Merriam-Webster, to which the laws of nature and nature's God entitle us. And so anyway, this is what I've come up with. I mean, it's not what I've come up with, but it's been like, it's come to me, I guess, and through research, because, we need the letters of the law in this Treaty of 1732, I think, may have all the words that we've been looking for, which then when you look into later documents, it says, as our forefathers have done. And so that means, like, the way that these treaties worked is one folds into the next, folds into the next, folds into the next. So if we have a long history, and we don't need to go into all the details because we both know what those details mean, right? And so we'll go ahead and skip forward. Sorry. And this actually did not come up. The whole letter didn't come up, but I'll just give you like a brief rundown of okay, so this is the Canandaigua Treaty, Treaty of 1794, which is when the United States did this. There's a lot that I don't know. I'm still learning a lot. But what I do love about this is that Timothy Pickering wrote to George Washington. It's like, hey, the 5 nations call you a liar. They call you a town destroyer, and I am coming to you, and like, they respect me, and I need to know that you're not full of shit, basically. I love that Pickering is like calling him out, and is like, I have to believe that there's at least like, I want to be able to say that not all white people are liars. And so I love that we're in a nation where we're calling out the president, and how important that this relationship is during this time period when we have become the United States. We're no longer in these colonial times. We are the United States at this point. And so I really wish this whole letter was there. Again, there's a QR code if you're interested in reading the whole thing. It does get into that towards the end. And so Pickering was basically saying, like, I need to know that you're telling the truth. And so we're going to go to the next one. And George, go ahead and go back. And so George Washington writes back and says, I assure you that I am desirous that a firm peace should exist, not only between the United States and the 5 nations, but also between the United States and all of the natives of this land. And this peace should be founded upon the principles of justice and humanity as upon any immovable rock. And so, again, these may have just been words. I have heard Andrew Jackson waited until George Washington died to start the Indian Removal Act. I do not believe that the true United States exists by this 2-row wampum treaty. And the thing is if we're traveling down the river of life together, the ship is not supposed to affect the canoe. But the ship is, 1, moving in the wrong direction. 2, it's not considering the 7 generations, which is, this is our stuff. And 3 is poisoning the river. And so there's no way that the ship can exist and not affect the canoe or the inhabitants. Well, anyway, I'm not getting into that. Okay, so we're going to go to the next slide. So this is just a copy of the treaty. So it was interesting to go into the archives. This treaty has like 5 different names. And it's case sensitive and it's letter sensitive. And so if you have like one letter off, like I saw Seneca spelled like 6 different ways. So if you don't type it in the right way, it's not like Google where it'll be like, did you mean this? You just don't see it. We can, but just to show that like it did get put into a treaty. It wasn't accepted by all of the nations, which I've just recently learned. When I read it, it also says, you know, all Indians. So I personally believe, which I don't know that anyone agrees with me, but I personally believe that this treaty in particular says all Indians, which means it breaks colonial chains that are around all indigenous nations. Like, it breaks it all, because the idea was that if this experiment fails, then we the people have a responsibility to hold our government accountable to the original Constitution. So this is where the First Amendment comes in. Like, it's been years. I cannot find a way to exercise my First Amendment right to get a redress, to express my grievance about how much research I had to do to learn any of this. Because we all have a right. We can comprehend this, right? Like, kindergartners can comprehend this. And not to mention, they've removed the first sentence of our own document from our consciousness. It's in the document, but they teach us the second sentence as the first. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. That's the second sentence and not the first. And so my simple call to action is, why don't we teach this in school? We know by the Senate resolution that we've acknowledged, but as a government, where we got our Constitution from. Let's give credit where credit is due. Anyway, it is like phantom world. It is wild. The more I get, I mean, it's crazy. Anyway, so was that?
Lawless.
Yeah, it's lawless. So anyway, so we have a responsibility on this side. And it's been interesting because people have tried to push me like, well, why don't you go work for the indigenous people? I'm like, we're the one in the wrong. I have a responsibility to my Constitution. And so when people have said things like, what does this have to do with anything? Or I'm like, it's the most patriotic thing I can think of. You know,
Yeah, right.
you know, because, oh yeah, here's the First Amendment again. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, which means we are not a Christian nation. I don't have any problem with Christians. Love the Lord with all your mind, heart, body, spirit, and soul, but keep it inside of yourself. You know, radiate the love of the Lord and keep your dogma to yourself. But here we go. And so we all have a right to petition the government for a redress of grievances. And I would venture to say that if our amendments are the building blocks of the house of our nation, and the first building block does not exist over something so elementary and simple, that the whole idea of what we think we know of the United States doesn't exist either. It's a mirage, which is going to get into this other thing that I'm working on, but I haven't been allowed to dive into it because I had to prepare for this. So that's next week. Okay, so we'll go into the next one. Mr. Loren Thompson told me a very beautiful story about our flag. I'm not doing that because you're here, actually, Loren, sir. You're up. Okay, so you guys remember the 2-row, right? The 2-row wampum?
Yeah.
And you remember what it looked like? How it had the lines across it? So Sonny went to go visit Loran, and they gave me a call, and I talked Loran's ear off, and then we met Friday, and I think we've continued to talk for days. But anyway, he was like, what are they teaching you? What have they taught you about your flag? And I was like, and so I asked him if he would tell the story to you, because he's here, and if I try to tell it, it's not going to be as cool as if he were to tell the story. So,
Okay, the flag, red, white, and blue. Okay. The old people used to talk to one another in their meetings, casual, right? And in those talks, they would sometimes talk about the flag after talking about the wampum belts, especially the 2-row one, okay? And what they would say is, this flag that they're flying. Red, white, and blue. It's almost word for word as the two wrote. And we wonder why they don't teach that to the people in their schools. When they got here on the shores, they looked at us and they called us the red man. The red. So in turn, we called them the white man. The red and the white. Okay. 13 colonies came about and an agreement was made. Battle, all of that stuff. And the 13 colonies freed themselves supposedly from Great Britain. So as you look at the flag, you got the red and the white, the red and the white, the red. In the world today, they'll say these colors don't run, but they place it with the military, right? What it's really talking about is the laws. Our laws won't tell your people what to do. We won't try your people. Same thing with your laws. They will not infringe upon us. We'll live side by side. You keep your laws in your ship, and we'll keep our laws in our canoe. Okay? They won't run. All right. Now you look at the stripes. You've got a red border and a red border, top and bottom. What's that tell you? You're on Turtle Island and you're on the inside. You're on our land. Mm-hmm. You are our guests. Mm-hmm. We will live side by side with this agreement. The blue, just like the two row. The sky, everything under the sky, natural, is the witness to this agreement, which will be forever. See, that's what they seen the U.S. flag saying. I don't know if they remember it that way, as happening that way, but that's how they used to talk about it at home. So I thought I'd pass that on.
And I love.
Yeah, she was supposed to tell it.
But he was here, so and I love that so much because what I have learned in my research from learning from them, right? I learned more about our history from the Haudenosaunee than I ever learned in our school. And so it's sort of like, for me to come back to our records, and I didn't need proof that what I was learning was the truth, but I did need proof to share with other people the truth of our history because we're such logical brains. And if we don't have it, and the way law works is that we only believe in the written word. We don't care about the story. Now, if you were to extract this kind of thinking and put it into a human being that does not care about feelings, doesn't care about the story, doesn't care about the feminine essence of being human, we would actually, if you extracted that and you put it into a human being, it would be a psychopath, and we would throw away the key to that human being. In my
Let me just say one more thing.
Yeah.
In the two row, the question comes up, what if one of our people get in trouble and your law has a problem with that? So what do we do? So the decision was made that we will come together, your government and our government, and we will solve it. Mm-hmm. See, we will solve that problem. So it's not really in their one political body's hands.
Yeah.
To solve that problem. See?
Yeah, and I also learned that every time we get a new president, apparently we polish the chain. Have y'all ever heard about the fact that we the government, like as the United States, we're polishing this chain, we're making sure it's not rusty? Like, does that even make any sense? But anyway, in in theory, we do this every time we get a new president. We actually had a coin talking about the arrows, the bundles of arrows where we're tied together, stronger together. I don't even know that it went to print. Maybe it did, but I've seen it, but I haven't actually seen the coin. And what was the other thing that I was just thinking? It all came up at one time. There's a lot in here. It's like
The witnesses.
Oh yeah, the witnesses over this agreement. And then remember that picture, and the eagle is overseeing this thing. And I hear it all the time, our system's broken. We know our system's broken, but what we don't know is that our system is broken because we broke a covenant that was supposed to last forever. And so the sun is still shining, the grass is still green, the stars are still shining, the earth is still here. And
Water's still flowing.
Water's still flowing downstream. So it's not, it's not over. But I think that this is one of these things that, like, I really hope that it's something that we can start considering as, because it's individual, and the individual creates the collective. And what I do know about us is we have so many people that are fighting for, $9.2 billion annually are fighting for the earth. And so if we knew that all of this was going on, I see in history all the time where the truth of our history has just been erased from our knowledge. And now that I see it, I can't unsee it. George Washington's like, the great experiment of the United States. And like, it was an experiment because it was temporary. According to the Great Law, we were going to try it out. See what happens. We moved outside of the shade of the tree of peace a long time ago. Did you know Johnny Cash wrote a song about all this? I found this out later. So that's just a song that we can play.
Play it?
Sure.
The album that song is on,
Yeah.
the government came to Johnny Cash and made a deal with him to stop making those songs public.
That's right.
Yeah.
What?
And if he did, he would become a big name.
Oh my gosh. Didn't he purchase a billboard sign that said, "Where are your guts?" Where are your guts? Wasn't that a thing?
Where are your guts? Yeah.
I thought he did the whole album on that, and he had paid for a big billboard that said, "Where are your guts?"
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, he did that.
It's a whole album dedicated to this, and the song that I thought it was actually about George Washington and the promises that we made, but that is not the song. But the lady Lynn, who created my loving PowerPoint to keep me on.
What is it? They call it Lake Perfidy in Seneca country.
Yeah, Seneca.
Yeah, they put that big dam up there.
Yeah. It was the Kutsu Dam.
Wow, that's amazing.
Okay. They put that big dam there. Oh, okay. And he, in his later life, got sick, right? Cancer.
Mm-hmm.
So the Mohawks tried to get the Senecas to put together a collection of people to approach him, to invite him to Seneca country and put a statue up there, a memorial type thing for him. To recognize how much he did for our people.
Yeah, he really tried.
Yeah, he did a lot just in that album. He did a lot in there.
Yeah.
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 Custer, you ride it.
Yeah. So
he don't ride well anymore.
So thank you all for coming.
It's great.
And thank you for Sonny. Sonny and I met on Facebook a few years ago when he was provoking the police. No, I'm just kidding.
Questioning their authority.
Questioning their authority and educating them on the reality of this. And then Sonny introduced me to Chanda. And so Chanda and Loran. So thank you for everything, and
thank you for coming all the way out.
Yeah, thank you for having us here.
This was a very powerful day today. I'm gonna sleep well. To me, it's just something I walked the walk, and we have work to do. We all have work to do. I repeatedly, I'm always saying, everybody has to stand up. Everybody. We can't no longer say that it's a black problem with the police or it's the Indians fight like you were told.
Yeah.
This is our future.
I get it all the
state.
Yeah, they're like, "Oh, are you still working on that Indian stuff?" I'm like, "Oh, you mean American history? Why don't you go work for the natives? Why would I do that when it's our responsibility to hold our elected officials accountable?"
Nakatiwa wat kon varado so kwego. Dis wahtaan die as kwak ta se umani when is rade. Yung wese die agwego skono the one tonyo tano yung wata garita. Nene kan varado sara and wat ka wasa uyera ga satsta sara yut ka mahake ka to wat is rage die skono the one tonyo. Nakatiwa na yo talk you what me ko. Nega do a hanti to taso uoni moni srate yu kwa gap taroru nani tini stahat yo hanjate ja te go ta go ka wa hake na hote ni yu kwa ya ta ken hatsara te yu kwa ta wa yo hanjate yu wesa ka te wa he tini staha ja te ya go nurun se ago yo tasara cha ta wa ni srake ka ya ta ken hatsara ja go ka wa hake una ya ne skana ni ai do no tonyu ongo ti un kota voya chon jate ne ka te wa na to wa ni ko raia da na hota ne sa oyera atste ka ya ta ken hatsara jot ka wa hake ne ni ti ni staha ja tina to ne ka te wa tonyu sto ju ko ni ko ja ora ka te wa ne no oya ne wa ne ti ni staha ja ta ku ne ja te go ju te wa tokku o ne ka jotna ka tokku o te ra sona ka satstassa kina dirun takke o na ja aguta karita te chinongwe ne ka te wa yung wesa sitten to wa ka ne chinua ti un ko ta wa ya ti ni sta ya ti na tokkwa chago cha te ka ko te chago ko ta ko kaya ta ken hatsara jukia ko hake ne na ungo ti ko ta wa ya chon chate ne ka te wa hang ka ko ni anti to to ni ko ra ko nuni ska ni ko ra anto wat se na to ni ko ra ya ra te ya ti ni sta ya ti na to ko anti to wa ya to je ti no ra to ni usto hak ne ni ko ni ko
ja
ta ka te wa to ne ne ya te ko ta yu nyok ja ti ni sta ja taake ne de ko to ko ti na hota judiena Oggi io dio to cinome. Kasat stossara io not ka wa hake. Ne ka te wa ni when is the guess you wesa. Just the wagata. Da io not the hake ko to ko cinici io not ka wa hake kasat stossara. Ne io do skono ai do no tonyo. Ci te un ko ta wa io chon jate. Ne ka te wa ga kweni anti to wa ta we yanto. No to ni kun raera ta ne sa uyera kaya ta ken hatsara anti to wat ka to jetino horato tinioskat audio to sara you not ka wa hake I yung goya ta ken hatsa na yo to you wat ni ko ja ora ka te wa ne no oya ne ka eri ni orake te hati wora moya jo hunjate ne de watunya yung wesa ka te wa Nene cinici juerale jihunjate. Nene ja te tunquistus. Ni cinundi un ko tavoja. Nene jone rakotin juti satsta sorvana kajeri ni overake. Nene te vat kahtus anke no guardi jut kate. Te vat enu janiste aio kina tunhase tini hoti satsta sorete te hati wara waya ne ka te wahe anka kweni na to to ni kun raera te anti to to waya to te jetti no wara to ne nas ka eri ni wara ko ka te wahe na yo to ne ni ko ni ko ora ka te wahe ne no oya Nena ena ka tiko den tistata. Kassat sara yudu. La de veras yetinatu kwa. Nena aase sununi chika ne karunyo chun jate. Yung wesa ka te wahed no ne. Nena kwa sat kwa te kon ruti sat sto sarayo. Yung wesa chi ya ke yo da het stakwa. Chiniji rutsta raudio tansara. Kwa neste. Chiniji aase sununi chika ne karunyo chun jate. Nega te wahe skat ni kuunda antawatste. Na tuota ni kuunda jera te tajetino horatu kassat sara yudu ra te veras. Ehkä te wahe najuttunga joko ni kuunda.
Yeah.
Aina ka te wahe nena oja nena ka jisto kwarun. Chito wachia cheke ne karakwa. Te hodiria na wako yeti sutta. Asutta ne karakwa. Nena wego te kai na wako. Unayawa ti hunjate skon agohake. Katsat stossora chate gaagute agayanta ke kon ti hunjate. Skon ai to wanu tonyohake. Nena di kwata wai yeti nistahi ya take. Nega de wahe yatsunuja. Ti ahta honu te hodi norunsa. Kwatoga tiniji rudio te chate gaagute. Tinigayo ta sarota. Rudiena siwase chunjate. Nega de wahe askakweni. Nena ko yuko gata rodo uani uni sarate. Na to wato ni ko raiera te. Anti to wato ya to skadi ko ora otawatste. To chetino horatu. Nena sa uyera chitkaru yahre. Rudio tere. Ne unaya skona ai to wanu to nyohake. Ko jon chade ti ko tawai. Ehkä te wahe na yutonga ki ko ni ko. Aina ka te wahe nena oja, nena joe nisu, tjuhun jaate. Ja ne tiun kwa diantare, waka nuu, nikä wenu, kasat sta sara goa. Nena ju ta au sat sta sara tessa kun na vi hakea, a kwe kun na hota sua, kasat sta sara judio, a judio da chinamwe, unayawan I unque ti kota voia skona ai to no tu hake. Nega te wahe. Nena onka kweni. Na to ni ku haiera te sauiera. Katsat stossara jo we nisu john jate. Ta chetinu horatu. Aase anjito uni tinate tuota. Nega te wahe. Uani wani saradi wakya tarodo. Na gat kweni. Nena wat kwawona katsat stossara yuyan tan ti on jate ti karu yate tu so wat tu sayetinu waratu uani ni wani serate ehkä te wahena kat kweni wat kwawona kwe ni tan wat kwan waratu ti dis wahtanti uani ni serate etto. Now, okay, I just gave a Thanksgiving, okay, for all of us here that have come forward, put all of our work and responsibilities aside to come to listen, okay. And then from there, all of the powers that have been put into our Mother Earth, that she has not given up on her responsibilities. She gives forward all of her strength every day and every night so that we can roam on her body peacefully. So we gave thanks with one mind, we gave thanks to that. And we went all the way up through to the grass, the trees, all of the natural growth in the world, the water, the fish life, the animal life. We gave thanks to all of that. And gave thanks that they have not given up their responsibility to the rest of us, that they are still coming forth. And we gave thanks for all of that, right up to the sun, the stars, and our grandmother, the moon. Okay, so we gave thanks to all of that. So that's the best that I could do to carry your words of thanks to all of those things. Thank you.
Thank you.